Today, for episode 3 of our Smart Mobility series, Senior Product Marketing Manager Dan Large, Senior Business Development Manager Andrew Fawcett, and Product Management Director Nuno Almeida from Dover Fueling Solutions discussed the two key M's for any fuel retailer: maintenance and measurable. Listen as we examine how retailers can enhance operational efficiencies and improve the overall customer experience on site with measurable systems and proactive maintenance. Today, for episode 3 of our Smart Mobility series, I'm joined by Dan Large, Andrew Fawcett, and Nuno Almeida as we discuss the two key M's for any fuel retailer: maintenance and measurable. Why, you ask? Measurable systems are crucial for managing fuel deliveries and preventing potential leaks, as well as ensuring accurate stock control, while maintenance of site assets is vital for reliable operations. If measurable systems and maintenance are so important, how are many fuel retailers unable to enhance operational efficiencies and improve the overall customer experience on site? Today we'll discuss this with Andrew, Dan, and Nuno. Thank you all for joining me today.
Welcome.
Is it fair to say that measurable systems and proactive maintenance are key for successful business operations?
Yes, I think it is fair. Everything starts with collecting data. Our systems that we provide as solutions, and being, for example, our tank gauge consoles, Maglink LX, or our Fusion forecourt controllers, they have a key role at the station architecture to collect data, and which is then key to deliver valuable information by some of our other solutions, such as DX Wet Stock, and allows our customers to effectively manage and optimize their site operations.
Yeah, I just think really in general, you have to have the data on site. Automation is key, really. We're in 2025 and a lot of stations around the world still have things like manual dipsticks and so forth. So these automation systems that Nuno mentioned, forecourt controllers and gauges with the ability to enhance and analyze that data via wet stock will obviously does play a huge part in both proactive and reactive maintenance of sites that may not have been possible 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, no, of course.
So automation and data is extremely important. It's becoming even more important. So if you look at it from a dispenser point of view, if you have the data available, there's a lot that you can learn about that dispenser. Okay, you can learn how it's operating and you can see if it's coming to a failure point. You can also predict what potentially could need changing in the dispenser over its lifetime. And what that leads to is the ability to have a more effective uptime on site, and allowing you to have more customer throughput, and generally keep your fuel dispenser running for longer. That is only achievable if you have the data available, and you see now increasingly more and more automation, and that's where items like remote diagnostics coming into DX Monitor become more and more valuable in the market, because it's allowing access to dispenser data that just wasn't possible even 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, it's almost as if the more data you have to know where you're at, the better you are prepared for the future. Data is incredibly valuable and it's not something to be underestimated. Just to come back to you, Dan, what type of information should retailers be measuring and why?
So there's some items that they've been able to measure for a while through things like wet stock systems. So important items like your flow rate will indicate if you're having blockages or issues on site. However, it's important to measure your VR efficiencies, how your vapor recovery is operating. You can also look at items like the voltages on a dispenser to determine if you've got any battery faults, if there's items that are starting to fail there.
Mm-hmm.
And generally with data and other connections, you can also, so if we look at things like remote diagnostics, you can reset dispensers, you can pull logs from dispensers. So pretty much anything that is going on in a dispenser, if you've got the correct tools, you can you can keep a monitor on it, and that allows you to determine if you're gonna, if your dispenser is down, you can know before someone gives you the phone call. So how it currently operates is a dispenser breaks, the end user will go into the forecourt, say, hey, this one's broken. Forecourt may then phone up their service, whether they do that directly or through someone else. Their service may have to then go, okay, what's the code? Send someone to site, look at it. If you're constantly able to monitor and pull operation data from a dispenser, you're seeing that fault either before it happens, or you potentially know what the error is when you get that phone call to go and fix it. So your first time fix rate is just much better.
In terms of the whole being able to see the data and the measurement in real time probably allows retailers to become more proactive than reactive. And going by your description there, Dan, it looks like it could save an awful lot of time and effort for staff on site, as well as potential costs as well for service call-outs, etc.
Yeah, so there's a lot of data that, and Andrew will be able to talk about it better, but there's been a lot of data that you can get out of wet stock. Okay, so you can look at flow rates and if your meters are drifting, but making your dispenser connected as well provides a whole raft of dispenser specific data that you're not able to get through other systems, and the ability to interact with that dispenser in a way that you just haven't before. So if we look at connections to things like POS systems, there's limited alarms and limited data that you can get through a communication protocol, which is how dispensers have always been connected. With things like remote diagnostics, you can actually see pretty much everything that dispenser is, even if it's a minor error, it can flash a minor error, which will allow you to predict in the future.
Yeah, I
as
think
well.
I think that's really important for retailers to understand that data and measurement and management truly is key, and it allows you to keep tabs on all of your equipment. And then, Andy, just coming to you, as Dan kind of touched on wet stock there, what kind of information should retailers be measuring when it comes to wet stock?
So outside of the dispenser world, you're looking at your tank gauges, as Nuno said before, your forecourt controllers, and generally they produce in real time stock level readings for each of the tanks on site, sales transactions and footfall. So, how much has been sold through each dispenser, each nozzle, how many transactions have gone through, as well as litres. Temperature information is also collected as well for analysis. All of the alarms and alerts that the systems are generating on site, from the tank gauge, the sensors around the forecourt, the forecourt controller, the POS, all of these things are collected, and like as Dan said, outside of the dispensers and the error codes, and they're all collected generally in real time. So it gives the site themselves, the head office, whoever's in charge, or third-party companies like ourselves using DX Wetstock to analyze that data in real time, generate findings, reports that really will help those stations at high level, network level, or even at site level to just operate more efficiently, rather than relying on information that may be 2, 3, 4 days out of date, as traditionally was the case.
Yeah. And then obviously wet stock works hand in hand with automated tank gauging systems. So, Nuno, what information should the retailer be measuring via their ATG consoles?
There's two real-time measurement devices on the typical forecourt. One is the dispensers that Dan was mentioning. The other one is the tank gauge. And from the tank gauge, we are able to collect valuable information such as the inventory, the delivery that was done to the site. We can provide fuel reconciliation. We can monitor the tank calibration, environmental compliance. So all that combined with collecting data and then feeding that data into a high-level tool like DX Wetstock enables really true valuable information for whoever is managing the site.
And is there anything, Nuno, that retailers don't currently measure right now, but you think is increasingly valuable for them to kind of pay attention to?
Yeah, I think we have a few examples of new features or new tools that we are giving to our customers, and that not all of them are using already. So today on our tank gauge solutions, we have some new interesting features, such as not only the traditional detection of water presence inside the tanks, which is key since many years and has been monitored with rudimentary methods but effective. But today with the more advanced fuels and also with the biofuels that have alcohol, we have, for example, one feature which is the capability to detect the phase separation in ethanol blends, for example,
Okay.
which allows our customers to act in advance when the problem is starting before it becomes an issue for their customers. By using features like that, which are available as standard in our tank gauges, our customers can take the most out of investing on a system like a tank gauge.
Andy, in terms of wet stock management, historically, you kind of mentioned at the start that a lot of the processes with wet stock in some retailers and in some countries across Europe are still very manual. Is there anything that retailers don't predominantly measure and you think is important that they do?
It's probably not a case of things that they don't measure. Maybe they just don't utilize some of the data as much as they possibly could. And certainly from a wet stock perspective, if I touch on something like flow rates, the impact of a declining flow rate where the fuel is being dispensed slower than it should be from the dispensers, perhaps for varying reasons, has a huge effect on both sales at site level, customer experience and efficiencies. We have a really good example of one of our big customers in the APAC region, whereby they access DX wet stock on a daily basis. They look at the flow rates collected from all of their stations in one place, so they utilize the report. They're looking at the trends over the previous days, and if there's a declining trend, the system is telling them that particular nozzles have a declining flow rate. What they're then doing is their own analysis on top of that and determining, is this a trend that's a long term? Is it just something that's happened for a couple of days? They're then actually dispatching engineers to site to validate those numbers.
Okay.
And it's an extremely successful hit rate in terms of the percentage of flags on the system from the data versus the actual physical measurements at sites. They started off using that information to go and send somebody to site to fix the flow rate, the dispensers, just basic maintenance in some cases. And actually what they started to do as well, they're logging onto the system and looking to see if there's any other dispensers at site that may be showing a change in flow rate that might need to be addressed during that one visit, rather than come back and have to go back time and time again. And obviously this proactive maintenance of things like flow rates, it negates the need for the retailer themselves to wait until something is broken before they report it back to their maintenance provider. By then it's too late, the dispenser's offline and the customers are already a bit disgruntled at the fact that they can't get fuel.
Yeah. No, I think that's really valuable because it allows them to almost determine, oh, we need to look at that before it becomes an issue and then hopefully not impacting any downtime or a negative customer experience. So just kind of touching on that, Dan, I'll come to you for dispensers. Does proactive maintenance always equal reduced costs?
So, what proactive maintenance gives you is that it keeps your dispenser in the best condition that it can be. So, effectively, if you think of the forecourt, you have the dispensers and your end users. You're wanting to make those sales in as an efficient way as possible. So more throughput and sales on the dispenser is better for your business. So if you have unscheduled maintenance or downtime due to something going wrong with the dispenser, that's sales that you're not making. Your customer may turn up and you've had to block off a pump and then they have to wait for another pump, and that all leads to a negative customer experience. And everyone will be aware of turning up to a petrol station very, very busy and 2 or 3 dispensers not operating. It can be, as an end user, quite frustrating. So the more proactive that you are on fixing any faults and performing your maintenance schedule means that you're less likely to have the cost of downtime to your business. A dispenser has got lots of moving parts. They're intended in field life as an asset for 10 plus years. If you think like your car, so that's an asset that you might have for 10 plus years, you wouldn't leave it unmaintained. Okay. And if you have the data to know that your car was going to fail, you may be inclined to go and fix that to keep your car running, because for you personally, your uptime, it is important. And it's the same when it comes to dispensers. There's lots of moving pieces, and the uptime of that is important. So it lowers your cost in the long run. You're keeping your sales throughput. You're not needing to have the downtime, and if something fails, it may be more costly than if you'd picked it up earlier and fixed it earlier. So
No, and of course that makes complete sense. Like you were saying, like a car, you would probably service it and make sure it was up and running before you went and took it for its MOT, rather than have its MOT fail and then you have to pay for to re-MOT it plus to make any mechanical fixtures. In terms of proactive maintenance, Nuno, when it comes to ATG, does the proactive maintenance always equal kind of those reduced costs sort of expectation?
Yeah. Not only what Dan has already mentioned on the dispenser side, but there is a lot on the forecourt that having a tank gauge and looking at it carefully at the data that comes from it can save you a lot of trouble and cost. So I can think of examples like monitoring the water level in the fuel or the phase separation, like I said before, and that basically prevents having issues with customer cars being stopped because they are pumping water or not proper fuel. But we can also think of other features, like, for example, if you have environmental sensors in some containment sumps that are in the site, and this is a very common practice, if you are able to monitor the presence of water or liquid or hydrocarbon fuel in these containment sumps, you can act in advance, can save a lot of issues, and including some environmental compliance, which we know have problems from the environmental perspective as well, but can have a very significant financial impact as well.
Yeah, and not only that, in terms of environmental and legal compliance, it's damaging to brand and to site perception as well, and not only damaging to the environment. So that's a very key point, that having something that can monitor that kind of looks at it twofold, doesn't it? And then, Andy, from a wet stock management point of view, does proactive maintenance and obviously the data that you collect from the system, does that help reduce costs?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the things we've touched upon previously around repeat visits and so forth, the environmental issue with regards to leak detection as well. So once these issues do occur, spotting them as quickly as you can in real time in most cases obviously prevents any spill to ground, which comes with its cleanup costs and so forth. So, yeah, from that perspective, the traditional wet stock management system also looks at stock level readings as well, which can help with scheduling deliveries as well. So aside from maintenance, you can use the data from that equipment at site to utilise other areas of your business and efficiencies, be it fuel replenishment systems, like with one of our partners, Bottom Line. Mm-hmm. We send that data, we analyse that data for wet stock analysis, but also have APIs in place between ourselves and their customers so that they can schedule their deliveries as well. So it's not just using the data for maintenance, but all of the information that is collected from site it's all around efficiencies, but it's all around operational cost savings for the customer as well.
Yeah. And just kind of staying with you and touching on that, we've mentioned before, and you'd mentioned specifically, there's maybe some retailers not utilising all the data that they could to get the bigger picture. But what impact can an old system or equipment have on the overall performance of a site when it comes to maintenance and measurable related equipment?
Yeah, I think from an old equipment perspective, obviously the older the equipment, the more likely it is to start to fail. Especially with, if you think of the infrastructure of a retail station, the pipe work, the tanks, the older that equipment is, the more likely it is to have issues, potential leaks and spills. Regular maintenance of those systems is key, but also from a wet stock perspective, the monitoring of those systems is also key. And in some countries, some of our customers, they've stopped tank testing, for example, because they have a wet stock system in place. So rather than test the integrity of the tank every year, whichever you can imagine a tank that may be 25, 30 years old, that testing process itself might cause problems. And we've got examples examples of that in some regions whereby the customer has been to the tank to maintain it and test it and make sure it hasn't got a problem, but the maintenance provider's actually introduced the problem during that testing period that it didn't have before. So using that wet stock data to essentially as a replacement for those testing procedures is key for a lot of our customers. Old equipment in terms of perhaps dipstick and dipping the tank rather than tank gauges obviously has its issues with inaccuracies. Really dipping the tank a couple of times a day, how accurate are those dips? Who's doing the readings? Is it the same person as yesterday? So really, as our customers across the globe are upgrading from the traditional methods of running a retail station, which are manual, to tank gauges and forecourt controllers, then that negates the risk of any issues happening and inaccurate data points.
Yeah, and there's so many varying factors. If you were only doing it a couple times a day, there's so much that can change in between those time periods. And I think you were talking about older systems, wear and tear, needing replacement. Nuno, what happens when someone has been relying on a tank gauge for years and then suddenly it's end of life? Like what happens for those sorts of customers when it comes to the overall performance of their site?
Yeah, so the older the system becomes, you get into problems like Andy was mentioning, like having reduced accuracy, reliability. So that can create issues in other solutions that are present in the customer infrastructure. But today we can offer a brand new portfolio of solutions that can provide our customers an easy path for upgrade from legacy solutions, sometimes even without having to replace everything. You can scale up your investment and do it in stages.
Yeah.
Having in mind that interconnectivity between the various systems is key. So it all feeds data, they all feed data, that then it's turned into valuable information.
Yeah, no, of course. It's good to know that there are products and systems out there that can have that legacy interconnectivity for any retailers out there looking to upgrade their systems or looking to replace maybe something that's end of life. Dan, just coming to you, in terms of old systems, you mentioned earlier that dispensers are a large investment. They normally last between 8 and 12 years. Why would retailers look to upgrade their dispensers kind of at this stage of energy diversification? Obviously, old wear and tear of older equipment can make it sore, but what impact does that have on site performance if they don't look to upgrade, and maybe like touch on the total cost of ownership as well?
So I guess it kind of depends how old your system is, right? So if you're at the point now you're sat on 12-year-old, 20-year-old equipment in a lot of cases across Europe, and you're thinking, do I upgrade my system or do I try and sweat it out a little bit longer? You're already kind of on some of that equipment, the limits of what it was already intended for. Okay. And although we always endeavor to provide 10 years of aftermarket support, which we do well, and we have dispensers that may be 15, 20 years older, and we're still able to provide aftermarket support for them, at some point it will become more expensive maintaining that equipment.
Yes.
And so at that point, it is more cost effective to buy a new dispenser, which will be to the latest levels of quality standard with, features and capabilities that a really old dispenser just doesn't have, to allow you to be connected to newer systems to get all the efficiency that also comes with that. So newer dispensers are generally better on the total cost of ownership. The expected downtime from them is minimal. And you restart the clock with, terms of support and availability. So that new dispenser, you can in 10, 15 years decide if you're going to change again at that point and see where we are in the energy transition. But what we know in terms of energy transition is that the conventional fuel, is still going to be around for long enough that if you're looking now at sweating your assets, then the age of the dispensers that you have become really important, particularly if you're looking at your image and customer experience. So an example of that, so there's some dispensers on a forecourt not far from where I am situated. The dispensers on them must be 15 years old, and the experience as an end user was awful. The dispensers were slow, they were very loud, and that doesn't, in today's environment, reflect very well on on your brand. So me as an end user, I won't go to that station because
Yeah.
I know that I'm not getting a good fueling
Yeah.
experience. So yeah, the point at which you change equipment becomes very important, particularly now in a more connected environment where you can get more data. The older the dispenser, the less likely you're going to be able to predict what's going on with it. And you're sat with waiting for it to break down and then covering the cost to fix it at that point.
Yeah, I think a lot of retailers underestimate the customer experience. I know that all of you have touched on that throughout this podcast episode, and it really is incredibly valuable because given your example there, Dan, you did not enjoy your refueling experience, and therefore that has impacted your thought process about refueling there again. I think retailers need to be aware that change can be incremental, is not to induce a lot of additional investment, particularly at a time of a lot of uncertainty, but also if they do make that investment, they're getting that interconnectivity that Nuno touched on, and it fits in with your wet stock, POS systems, your ATG, your dispensers. It gives that 360 control of a site. And I think moving forward, that's the way the industry is going. And I think that's what retailers really need to take into consideration, because what might not be seen as a right now might be in 5 years too late if they haven't already made those sorts of investments. And just kind of to tie it up, Nuno, I'll come back to you. What DFS products and solutions can we offer retailers to allow them to stay proactive when it comes to maintenance and general site measurement?
Yeah, in some sort or the other, I think all DFS products are focusing on the forecourt area or on the shop to enhance the management of the sites. But regarding proactive maintenance, I would think that probably the most key products would be a 10 gauge solution with the MagLink LX consoles combined with the DMP probes, RDM. On our dispensers, Fusion forecourt controller, all that combined with our DX wet stock really can provide valuable proactive tools for our customers.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it kind of shows this one-stop shop mentality that we're not just a dispenser manufacturer, a wet stock manufacturer, ATG console manufacturer. Look at everything and how it all works together to provide the retailers with that reassurance and data that they need to make sure that they can effectively run their fuel station. Andy, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I think ultimately from a wet stock perspective, DX wet stock in particular, data is key. I would say as well that from a DX wet stock perspective, we are device agnostic, so it doesn't have to be, everything on site doesn't have to be Dover Fueling Solutions branded. We integrate with all sorts of branded tank gauges, forecourt controllers globally around the world. Obviously, it's more efficient if you do have a Fusion or a MagLink console, because they can get that data to us in a much easier way. But yeah, from a wet stock perspective, data is key. Real-time analysis of issues is key. What else you do with that data is just helps to run the station more efficiently. Everything from delivery of fuel to the station to delivery of fuel to the customer, and everything in between, really.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. And I think a lot of our products and solutions do integrate with legacy equipment. And like you said, it doesn't have to necessarily be ours. It helps if everything's DFS, but that doesn't deter the fact that you can make an investment to a DFS product solution when you have other equipment on site. So I think that's really valuable for retailers to know as well. I think it's the same in real life, isn't it? You don't shop everywhere for everything that you need, you kind of shop about. And then Dan, just coming back to you when we talk about the proactive maintenance side of things, is there anything from dispensers that you would like to add?
I think Nuno and Andy said it all there about the connectivity on site from dispenser point of view. The more you are able to get from the dispenser and connect into those on-site systems, the more benefit you receive at the end of the day, because you can look at predictive stuff. But yeah, the dispenser is one point in a connected forecourt. I mean, you can connect the dispenser to to other POS systems and other connections, but things like our remote diagnostics, it's designed to be POS or system agnostic in that it has its own connection deliberately so that you can get the most out of it where other systems don't.
It's been really insightful to talk to you all today, and I think one of the key takeaways that we can take from this podcast episode is that incremental changes really do make a big impact, particularly for the longevity of a fuel retail site. And also, data is key. I think everyone kind of knows that by now, but the amount of data that we can gather from new technology really is vital for the longevity of retail stations and the future, particularly when it comes to energy diversification. So thank you all for joining me today, and I will speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Maintenance and Measurable, the third episode in our Smart Mobility series. We hope you enjoyed this episode with Dan, Andrew and Nuno. If you'd like to support the podcast, feel free to share it with others, post about it on social media or leave a review. To catch the latest from Dover Fueling Solutions, you can follow us on LinkedIn or visit our website at www.doverfuelingsolutions.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week where we continue to fuel the conversation.